The Persian Gulf does not lie. When the United States is angry, truly, seriously, consequentially angry, it does not issue strongly worded statements first. It moves steel. It repositions ships. It quietly shifts bombers to bases that nobody talks about until they need to talk about them. It prepositions fuel, munitions, and logistics chains that take weeks to assemble and only exist for one reason. And right now, every one of those indicators is blinking at the same time. Two carrier strike groups are now in striking distance of Iran. B-2 stealth bombers have been quietly repositioned toward Diego Garcia, the remote British island base in the middle of the Indian Ocean that the Pentagon only ever fills up when it is genuinely, seriously thinking about hitting something fortified, hardened, and very far away. Intelligence officials have briefed key congressional figures, and inside the White House, Donald Trump has spent the past week fielding options from military advisors on what a strike against Iran's nuclear program would actually look like. What it would cost, what it would destroy, and what happens the morning after. This is not a drill. This is not election cycle posturing. Something is moving. And the next 72 hours may determine whether it stays in the realm of pressure or crosses into something that cannot be undone. So we are going to break all of it down. What is actually happening on the ground and at sea? Why this moment? Why now? Why not 6 months ago or 6 months from now? What a real American strike on Iran would look like from the first second to the last. What Iran does in response. And this is the part that should keep everyone awake. And whether any of this has a diplomatic exit before it becomes something history books spend chapters on. Let's start with what we actually know. To understand why we are sitting here right now talking about a potential American military strike on Iran, you have to understand how we got to this specific moment, because this situation did not arrive overnight, and it did not arrive by accident. Iran's nuclear program has been a slow-burning international crisis for more than 20 years. 3 American presidents dealt with it before Trump's first term. There were negotiations in Geneva, in Vienna, in New York. There were partial agreements and collapsed agreements. There were sanctions and sanctions relief and sanctions again. The Islamic Republic of Iran has spent 2 decades playing a long game, enriching uranium incrementally, burying facilities deeper, dispersing equipment across more locations, while the international community debated the right combination of carrots and sticks to make them stop. What changed is the math. Over the past year, International Atomic Energy Agency inspectors, the people whose entire job is to monitor this, and American intelligence assessments have converged on a conclusion that crossed a threshold nobody wanted to cross. Iran's uranium enrichment has now reached levels that are technically incompatible with any civilian energy program. The specific number that matters is 60% enrichment. Weapons-grade uranium requires 90%. The gap between 60 and 90 is not a long journey. Technically, it is a matter of weeks of continued centrifuge operation, not years. The term the intelligence community uses is breakout capability. It means the time between where Iran is right now and the moment it could assemble an actual functional nuclear device has collapsed from years to months to a window that some analysts are now measuring in weeks. Not a weapon deliverable on a missile. That is a separate and longer engineering challenge. But a device. Proof of concept. The threshold that changes everything about how every country in the Middle East calculates its own security. That number, that shrinking window, is what transformed the conversation in Washington. Not from 0 to 100 overnight, but from how do we keep pressure on Iran diplomatically to are we past the point where diplomacy can achieve the outcome we need. And critically, there is a military logic that operates on a separate timeline. The longer enrichment continues and the more material Iran accumulates and disperses into deeply buried facilities, the harder a military strike becomes. The option does not stay on the table indefinitely. It has a shelf life, and American planners believe that shelf life is running out. Trump came back to the White House with a posture toward Iran that was always fundamentally different from his predecessors. His first term ended the nuclear deal, imposed what his administration called maximum pressure sanctions, and in January 2020 killed Qasem Soleimani, Iran's most powerful military commander, in a strike outside Baghdad airport that reordered every calculation about American willingness to use force. That strike sent a message that was heard in Tehran and in every capital watching. This administration sets red lines and enforces them. Now, in this term, with the intelligence assessment pointing to a closing window and an ally in Israel that has been publicly and explicitly threatening unilateral military action for months, the question that was always theoretical has become operational. Do it now, with American precision and American firepower and a degree of control over the outcome. Or watch the window close, watch Iran cross the threshold, and live in a Middle East where a country that has repeatedly called for the destruction of Israel and regularly threatens American interests now possesses nuclear capability. That is the choice being weighed. That is why the carriers are moving. Let's talk about the military posture specifically, because this is where the signals get very concrete. The United States operates 11 nuclear-powered aircraft carriers. Each travels with a strike group, guided missile cruisers, destroyers, attack submarines, supply vessels, and an air wing of roughly 70 aircraft. A single carrier strike group represents more combined air power than the entire military of most nations on Earth. When one appears in a region, it is a message. When two appear, oriented toward the same potential adversary, it is a fundamentally different kind of message, one that military planners on every side understand immediately. Right now there are two, and their positioning is deliberate in ways that take weeks to arrange. Carrier strike groups do not materialize overnight. Rerouting a carrier from a Pacific deployment, adjusting schedules, coordinating logistics, synchronizing the arrival with an existing group already in the Red Sea, requires planning that began well before any public reporting on a potential strike. Somebody at some level of the decision chain made that call weeks ago. That matters because it tells you this conversation inside the administration is not new. The public is hearing about it now. The planning started much earlier. But the signal that serious analysts are focusing on most intently is not the carriers. It is the B-2. The B-2 Spirit stealth bomber is not a tactical aircraft. It does not fly close air support missions. It does not strafe frontline positions or support ground troops in contact. The B-2 exists in the context of Iran to do one specific thing that no other aircraft in the American inventory can do. Carry the massive ordnance penetrator, the GBU-57, a 30,000-pound precision-guided bomb that was designed, tested, and built almost entirely with one target set in mind: deeply buried, hardened underground facilities of the kind that Iran has spent the last 15 years constructing specifically to protect its nuclear program from aerial attack. Fordow sits under a mountain. The Iranians did not build it that way by accident. They built it that way because they watched what American air power did to Saddam Hussein's infrastructure in 1991 and again in 2003, and they concluded correctly that anything above ground is vulnerable. So they went underground, deeper with each passing year, more reinforced with each new round of construction. The massive ordnance penetrator is the American answer to that calculation. It can penetrate through 200 feet of reinforced concrete before detonating. It was specifically upgraded after analysis of Iranian facility depths suggested the original design might not be sufficient. The B-2 is the only aircraft that can carry it. Diego Garcia is the closest base to Iran from which the B-2 can operate and return. The presence of those aircraft there, if confirmed, is not a general show of force. It is the specific tool for the specific problem being positioned within range. You do not move that tool unless you are seriously considering using it. Reporting from multiple outlets over the past week has sketched the broad outlines of what is happening inside the administration, and it is worth walking through carefully because the picture is more complicated than a simple yes or no on a strike. Trump is not operating in isolation. He is receiving input from a set of advisors whose views on Iran span a range from strike immediately to maximum pressure first, military option as a last resort. What they appear to agree on is that the status quo, Iran enriching at 60%, the clock running, the diplomatic track stalled, is not acceptable and cannot continue indefinitely. The disagreement is about timing, scope, and risk tolerance. Israel is a significant factor in this calculation, and not simply as an ally with interests. Israel has conducted its own strikes on Iranian territory in the past year, a remarkable development that would have been almost unthinkable a decade ago. Israeli officials have been explicit in public and reportedly more explicit in private. If the United States does not act, Israel will. A unilateral Israeli strike on Iranian nuclear facilities conducted without American coordination, potentially using American-supplied aircraft and munitions, and almost certainly triggering an Iranian response that draws in American forces anyway. That scenario, from Washington's perspective, is worse than a coordinated American-led operation where the United States controls the targeting, the timing, and the initial escalation management. There is also the negotiation dimension. The Trump administration has sent signals to Tehran through back-channel intermediaries, reportedly through Oman, which has historically served as the quiet meeting room between Washington and Tehran when both sides need to talk without admitting they are talking. The message, as best as outside analysts can reconstruct it, is something like, "This is your last genuine opportunity to reach an agreement that stops enrichment before American military options are exercised." The carrier movements and bomber repositioning are not separate from that message. They are the message. Credible threat is the foundation of the negotiating position.